Hi, good morning. It's Mary Brooks. Sorry for those of you who turned into watching this live last night. It didn't really go very well. Right around minute 30, I had a power issue. And when I got back online, I didn't realize that I didn't have my screen anymore. So sorry for you all that had to go through that. I'm going to add a few little extra things in here today, and I'll put together a little bonus, something to make up for the technology issue. So I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Those of you who don't know, that's where I live. So it's not Tuesday night, it's Wednesday morning. So I just wanted to say hi and welcome. Today's topic is something that I love. This is really kind of the basis of a lot of my coaching, is teaching people about how food heals their body and how these systems work together. And I do want to tell you, if you feel like you're not seeing this in the mainstream medicine world, there's really a reason. And that is functional nutrition outpaces medical practice by about 15 years. So this is really, I think, where medicine and health is shifting. And there's just so much to be done that is better than how we've been practicing things. And I'm really glad you guys are here, but listen closely, because this is not out there everywhere. It's all very, very research based, so it's not stuff I'm making up, but this is, I think, how women's health needs to be treated, and it's not happening. And that's why, I do what I do. And I really know I've seen it in my practice in the last few weeks, not even just with women, but people who have done the same thing for years and years and years with no results. And when we really uncover what's going on, all kinds of changes can happen. So we'll get right into this. Bear with me for just a minute. You'll see me. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. So there'll be, maybe 30 seconds where you'll see me shifting out of my screen, and you'll see my desktop, and then you'll see my presentation come up. So I'm still here. All right, so here we go. Okay, hopefully that didn't take too long. So this is session 3 of the Metabolism Makeover. There's me and Tammy. Tonight's session is called Healing the Adrenals, Thyroid, and Hormones with Food. I picked these 2 pictures for a reason. If you know me, gardening and nature are sort of my zen. And that picture on the left is a dahlia that I grew in my garden. I was super proud of it. And what I love about it is that, it's bright and wild and colorful, but it's just symmetrical, and it has, this order in it and system. So I'll tie that in a little bit later, but I think that's kind of a neat thing. And then on the right, there's just a little picture that says each season's harvest is nature's prescription for optimal health. And we'll talk about this somewhat tonight, and we'll continue to talk about it. But, we really are seasonal creatures as well. And one of the things that's happened with our food is that we eat so kind of out of order. And when we eat, what's in season, that food is freshest and it's best, and it's at its peak. And really, as our body, changes throughout the season, our food does too. So being in line with that is like one of the concepts that I want to introduce. So what we're covering tonight, there's a lot to go over. So I hope you have a pen and paper. Some things are in my slides, but I also try to cover some stuff as I go through the slides. We're going to talk about leaky gut. We're going to talk about the pillars of optimal gut function. We're going to talk a lot about the microbiome and gut flora and how those get disrupted. We're going to talk specifically about how to heal the gut, things that you can start doing right now. We'll cover common food allergens and triggers. We'll talk about the signs of your own detoxification system being impaired. I'm going to give you some of my favorite high nutrient dense foods. I don't really like the word superfood because I think that's kind of a marketing gimmick. But I always like to give you foods that sort of pack a lot of punch and will give you the things that we're going for in terms of getting your body back on track. We're going to talk about correcting deficiencies. This is something really interesting. It's the role of alkaline phosphatase in weight gain. So you want to pay attention to that. We're going to talk about the stomach acid myth, and then we're going to get to supplementation. I always say that I do mostly coaching, then I do whole foods, and I do supplementation last. A lot of people lead with supplementation, but I think you want to try to get everything else, fixed in the body and then do supplementation last, unless you're just really, really sick and, haven't been eating well at all. Sometimes we do need to do that first. Okay, so this is my little caveat. I hear a lot of people tell me, just make this easy for me. I don't have time, to deal with my food, or I'm so busy, I can't. And I get it. And I do try to give people the tools and not just the theory, but I want you to just think a little bit about that whole concept, because, first of all, I think the diet industry has really done this, and our current medical system is really, very pill oriented, very quick fix, just addressing the symptoms. But, Mother Nature cannot really be outsmarted. And, if you looked at my nature examples from our first session, you can't rush that process. It does take some time. The cool thing is that, even with 10 to 15 days of applying the principles that I use, I can see a person eliminate major symptoms that they've had for years and years and years. So it's not to say that healing doesn't happen, and it can be pretty miraculous. But, you really can't, do it fast and cheap. So yeah, there's sort of this myth of convenience, to be, fast, cheap, and easy. And I can say that very authentically, because if there's a mistake to have been made in nutrition, I've probably made it. And I can laugh about it because, a lot of times I made it with good intention. So I certainly have, done a lot of things in my own life, or adopted things for my family that when I look back at them, I'm sort of like, what was I thinking? So things that I used to think were healthy, Dannon yogurt, Gatorade, Shed Spread, Subway. I mean, I really did think that that was like a healthy fast food for a while. And, I understand that I get, just like anybody else, I get these marketing, advertising, media kinds of sound bites, and I sometimes act on them. And so one of the reasons why I am more thorough in how I explain things and I get into all the systems is that, when you only just pull out one piece or one part, you're not getting the whole picture. And that's why things don't work and they don't stick. And I'm just using this example. We know, as we've been adults and consumers and just living in the world, that when typically we try something that's, a quick scheme or a cheat or a workaround, in my life, most of those come and just bite me in the rear end. And so I like to use the example, we use this in my house, of, tools. When you're buying a tool for your yard or your household, or a kitchen tool, when you're young, you just need the equipment and you will buy what you can afford. But we've all had those experiences when they break and they fail and they're cheap and they come apart and you're just so frustrated. And when you have the time and the money and you buy the better one, you realize, okay, yes, it was more expensive, but it lasts, it's reliable, I can count on it, it doesn't break, I'm not replacing it every year. So that's kind of the shift I want you to make with some of your, thoughts about food. Picture on the left says, you are what you eat. Every 35 days, your skin replaces itself, your liver about a month. Your body makes these new cells from the food you eat. What you eat literally becomes you. So we do have a choice about what we're made of. Okay, so kicking this off with a quote. This is a quote from Michael Pollan, who I think is a really interesting writer, and he talks a lot about food in America. So here's the quote: "Cooking is all about connection. I've learned between us and other species, other times, other cultures, human and microbial both, but most important, other people. Cooking is one of the most beautiful forms that human generosity takes. That much I sort of knew. But the very best of cooking, I discovered, is also a form of intimacy. I recognize that I'm a little bit of a weirdo with my cooking and my food, that not everybody relates to me. I've been teased about it many, many times. And I get it. And I get it that not everybody wants to go to culinary school and they've got other things to do. But I don't know a person that doesn't really get joy out of, seeing food be prepared in their own home, to have the satisfaction of, something being on the stove, to, gather people in their home and cook. And it doesn't have to be complex, but, our traditions of having someone cook for us when we're sick, or, celebrating a beautiful occasion, like those usually are connected to food. And right now, we're also interested in food, but, we'd rather watch it on the cooking channel than do it for ourselves. And I think, we're losing that art, and I think we're paying a price for it with our health. So I'm not saying you have to go out and, be me in terms of my cooking passions, but a little bit of that love of yourself and of the food, and with how you do it with your family, can really, really make a powerful impact on just your own well-being and your happiness. So the reason this topic matters to me, in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, I really followed the medical model. Every problem I had, I addressed with drugs, antibiotics, surgery, steroids. I just kind of followed along. And I was just kind of too busy doing life. Like, my attitude whenever I was sick was, I don't really have time for this. I needed to get back to work or take care of my family. And anytime I wasn't well, I just wanted to fix it so I could, go back into battle. And I also did a lot of, the traditional diets that were popular in the 80s and 90s. So, low fat, low calorie, high intensity exercise. Those were sort of my patterns. What I know, and, I'm assuming everybody on the call is in at least their 40s, those approaches don't really work. And it's not because we're throwing in the towel and we're saying, I'm too tired to do that. It's just not a model that works for, long-term health in terms of the things that we're trying to balance, like your thyroid, like your adrenals, like your hormones. And the interesting thing to me, and this was probably my, lowest point, was, in 2007, I had thyroid cancer. And again, no real explanation as to why. And nobody really cared to explain that to me. But even worse was, after I had cancer and after I was cancer-free, I felt like I was sicker than ever. It wasn't what I thought. And so out of that, I really began to develop my own awareness, and I looked at much more of a systems approach, and I learned a lot of things about how medication was working or why it wasn't working in my body. And then the other thing was that I really didn't feel like there was any sort of like aftercare. There was no roadmap on where to go, at least with my thyroid. I was going in every 6 weeks and having my thyroid managed, incrementally, while I was just feeling awful. So I have a real passion for that particular subject. And then in my own practice, I'm just seeing women who feel pretty low about their health, and either they're told, they just need a pill, they're sort of crazy. They're not really getting the support and the guidance and the information that they need. So that's definitely what this session is all about. And I think you guys are going to find that you're going to know more about yourself and your body and your condition than your doctor does. And that way you can advocate for yourself, which I think is really important. Okay, so we're going to get right into leaky gut. So 80% of Americans have leaky gut. And the biggest misconception that I hear is that leaky gut would present itself as a digestive issue. So, frequently people say, I don't have a gut issue. My stomach doesn't hurt. I'm not having issues going to the bathroom. I don't have an allergy to a food. But that's really not what the leaky gut, that's not how it presents itself. It presents itself in a lot of different ways. And So we'll talk about all the ways that it may show up. But the reason why it matters to us is that leaky gut is always present in autoimmune conditions. It's always present in thyroid, always. And it's always a part of adrenal fatigue. So, and then what we know is that if you have leaky gut, you have inflammation. And if you are inflamed, your thyroid, we talked about this first session, is going to throttle itself back. It's really preserving itself because it's overworked and it's tired. And then your adrenals and your hormones aren't working. So that's why in session 1, we did this whole, interplay between all those different systems. So when people say the weight, I want to get the weight off, until we really address these issues, change doesn't really happen. And, not to be gloom and doom, but, things progress. So what you may be experiencing that is kind of a nuisance or, definitely cuts into your lifestyle, those things, when they go unchecked for long periods of time, can become other serious things. So it's really good to take this information and apply it so that you're being as preventive as possible. I wanted to just bring this into the presentation tonight because I thought it was pretty interesting, and I like real life examples. So I thought I would show you. One of the things I do with my private clients is I have them food journal, and I also do kind of an extensive food analysis to sort of figure out where things might be going wrong. So I wanted you to just take a look at this. So this is a gal that's dealing with some anxiety, some depression, and her big issue is she's just gained some weight and she can't figure it out. So this is what she eats. Every morning, a Greek yogurt, granola, grapes. And I'm assuming these others are kind of like either or. So half an English muffin with a tablespoon of reduced fat peanut butter, half an English muffin with egg whites, black coffee, lunch, banana and peanut butter, or apple and peanut butter, a bar. And then for dinner, lean cuisine, a turkey wrap with fat-free cheese, reduced fat mayo. So, you get the picture. So now that you've been around me a little bit and you're starting to see what we're talking about, I hope you see some of the things that I see. So number 1, this is what I frequently find. She's really not eating very much. I mean, I can crunch the numbers on this, but that's not a whole lot of food. Maybe, I don't know, 900 calories, 1,000. Then like her morning is kind of, even though she's looking for low calorie, she's kind of got a lot of processed food and a lot of sugary food. And then, peanut butter, that's not the best choice. It's peanuts actually have an aflatoxin in them, which contain mold. I mean, if you want to do a butter, something like almond or cashew or some butter would be better. But overall, I'm not seeing enough protein. I'm not seeing enough fat, not good fat. I mean, it's all coming from peanut butter. Fat-free milk, and no greens, like no veggies. So this is very common, that this is what we try to do to sort of, comply with what we think is a good caloric approach, but it's not really giving her the nutrition, and it's not getting her. And my other concern is, so little food during the day, and she's at work at 7 in the morning. So that's kind of typical. Okay, so let's talk about what does leaky gut look like. So if you look at the top, these are the things that typically create or exacerbate or begin leaky gut. And those are things like dietary proteins, low hydrochloric acid and enzymes, antibiotics, infections, blood sugar issues, antibodies. And the next little column row there is some of the triggers. But the thing to look at is the picture of the intestinal wall. So the gut is lined with these cells that they have, those little things that look like cow udders. Those are actually villi, and they help move the food along. And for some of us, those actually get damaged and aren't working particularly well. But what happens in leaky gut is the junctures between those cells should be nice and tight. But when we're constantly putting in toxins and things that break down the gut lining, those junctures become loose. And then food particles actually get down in between those junctures and get into the bloodstream. They were never meant to be there, but they get in. So, your body does have a way of dealing with that, but it sets up an inflammatory response and an immune response, and that's what breaks the body down. So the outcropping of that is, things can cross the blood-brain barrier. You have inflammation in the body. This is where autoimmunity comes from, and this is where malabsorption and nutrient deficiency comes from. So that's why it's so important when we're trying to change our nutrition to also address the gut and not be doing things that aggravate it, because we can be putting all the right things in, but they're not getting into the body in the way that they should be. And so the cells are either A, they don't have the right nutrients, or B, they're toxic because they're having to absorb all this other stuff. So we want to get the toxins out and we want to get the nutrients in. So very briefly, let's just walk through what leaky gut looks like. We said, well, it doesn't have to be digestive, although it can be. That's where the celiac and the IBS and the all of that can come from. And we'll talk a little bit more about digestion, but if digestion isn't working, whether that's too much, too little, you're always going to have a problem. So, but other ways that leaky gut affects the whole body. It definitely plays a role in depression, anxiety, and ADHD and autism. I mostly practice with adults, but I'm having more and more kids in my practice. And the impact on food can just be tremendous. And, putting the right foods in terms of, the right fats and the right proteins can really make a difference in brain health. Same thing with depression. We treat depression as if it's, only between your ears, it's in your brain, but 90% of your serotonin is in your gut. So if your gut is impaired, you're not getting the right chemicals, that naturally would alleviate depression. Other places where leaky gut shows up in the skin as acne, hives, eczema, psoriasis. Anytime I see someone with skin issues, we're going to look to the gut. And also what's interesting is if you detoxify, sometimes you'll have some skin, eruptions or changes because the skin is releasing toxins. So that's kind of normal. Other things, we talked about how it affects the adrenals tremendously. And then the joints. So things like rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, joint pain, muscle pain, that can be leaky gut. And then sinuses or, sinus infections and allergies. Most people will say, oh, my allergies are only because of what's outdoors or what's in the environment. But what you need to know is that all allergies are branches off the same tree. So if you're inflamed internally, your reactions to allergies are going to be much, much worse. So I definitely have a protocol for people who say, my allergies are a mess. I'm going to look at the diet right away. Okay, so things that are actually leaky gut that we typically don't treat as leaky gut. Asthma, for sure. I can tell you I had asthma when I was in my mid 30s. And once I changed my diet, it went away. And then one of my kids always had this kind of chronic junk in the back of his throat. And he would go through periods of exercise-induced asthma. And now, fast forward quite a few years, we finally took dairy out of his diet, and he's had a major improvement in all of those symptoms. But, without the knowledge that I have, he got put on drugs. He certainly was headed towards maybe having his tonsils out. And, I just didn't fully make the connection with the dairy, and it was tough to get him off of it. But it really can make a pretty big difference. So other things, the skin issues, joint muscle pain, food sensitivities. This is something that throws people off. Many people will tell me, well, I've had this food all my life. Like, why am I reacting to it now? Well, a couple of things. First of all, some foods are not what they used to be. Milk is a case in point. You know, I think part of the reason we could tolerate milk better was it wasn't full of so many things that it is now. Also, just as you have leaky gut, you know, you're going to have more reactions to food sensitivities or more reactions to foods. And, you know, if you've had anything else going on that would have kind of made you more vulnerable. Depression, anxiety, learning issues, autism, ADD, ADHD. So Josh Axe, who is a functional medicine person that I think a lot of, you know, he says, you're not what you eat, you're what you digest. So again, we got to work at making sure that our gut is actually functioning as well as possible. So the 4 pillars of gut function are digestion. So we're going to really be talking about how to maximize your digestion. The next one is elimination. So there's 4 ways that you eliminate, and we want to be making sure that we're, you know, tapping into all of those as effectively as possible. So the 4 are through urine, through poop. I get to talk about poop, through perspiration, and through breathing. So we want to make sure all of those detoxification pathways, I mean, your body naturally detoxifies all the time, but we want to make sure that we're optimizing those functions. So your microflora and then your gut integrity. So we're going to comprehensively make sure that we're touching on all 4 of those. So let's talk about the specifics of how your gut can be impaired. So number 1 on the list is age. Not much we can do about that. The next one is advanced glycation end products. My best example of that would be, you know, a very processed meat like a hot dog or a bologna that is then heated. Like that overly processed, cooked end product is very difficult for the body to digest. So, you know, foods that are just heavily processed, you know, fried foods and, you know, like a fried big onion ring, that just places a lot of stress on the gut. Alcohol impairs the gut. Food allergies, again, that's a wild card as to what everybody has, because, you know, a food that is good for one person is not going to be good for someone else. Gluten, definitely. Linoleic acid, these are all the cheap, heavily processed commercial oils like peanut, soy, safflower, corn. You know, I remember the shift that happened when we were all, you know, cooking with corn oil as if it was a good, and I think it was pretty much, it was a substitute for butter and, you know, things like Crisco and lard. The problem with those is that they are just heavily processed. One of them is actually, you know, processed with petroleum. So they're just really hard on the body. And I think that's why many times if you've eaten out, you know, those cheaper oils that, you know, I don't cook with at home, that's what they're using frequently in a restaurant. NSAIDs are all the over-the-counter pain medications, overgrowth of bacteria, psychological stress, fear and anger, strenuous exercise. So even though exercise is really good for us, you know, your endurance athletes, your triathletes, your marathoners, that can really impair their gut. And I see it a lot. You know, they'll think that, well, they're just injured from overtraining, which kind of sort of is true, but it's like the example that I gave you about, you know, when you burn a fire, you know, the fire is beautiful. So, you know, when we're doing strenuous exercise day after day after day, what you're doing is you're, you know, tapping into your Krebs cycle where you're, you know, transferring oxygen into energy, but the byproduct of that is like an ash in the body and it has to be moved out. Surgery and trauma, you know, sometimes post-surgery, you know, frequently you're given antibiotics or steroids or other things, but your gut can be impaired during that. And also, you know, in surgery, your gut doesn't work at all. So that's something that frequently can trigger a problem. Zonulin, there's many studies now documented. This is a byproduct of gluten, and it's specifically very damaging to that gut lining. And then antibiotics that are in drugs and food. Okay, so the biggest hazards to your immunity and gut. Number one is poor diet, and not picking on my client, but here's someone who means well, but is just not really eating a diet that is rich in all the nutrients and all the proteins and all the fats. So while she's really trying, she's not really giving herself everything that she needs. Toxins are a pretty big issue. We are putting so many pesticides on our foods, putting chemicals on our foods. I do a little bit of gardening, and when I do, I don't use any pesticides or chemicals because, if the bugs eat something, so what? I'm not going to worry about it. I just get less, and I kind of chalk that up as, nature, but that's not the case in manufacturing. There's so much pressure on profits and making the crop, disease resistant and pest resistant, that we're literally consuming all these toxins. So, I can remember at first, really not understanding why organic mattered. But if you look at sort of the importance of gut health, when you're literally putting these pesticides and chemicals in direct contact with your gut, and your gut is not able to filter them out, then that really can compromise your immunity. You want to take a look at medications. Many medications have fillers and binders and things in them that aren't very good for us. You also want to take a look at skincare, cosmetics, microwave food. I am not a big fan of microwaves. If you have to reheat something, fine, but it really changes the chemical structure of the food, and it turns it to an unstable form. So it's not really a great thing. And most, true microwave foods are not very good for you at all. They're full of a lot of stuff. If you do microwave, just please don't microwave in plastic, microwave in glass. And then, just look at the amount of plastics that come in contact with your body. I realize you can't eliminate all of them, but, use glass more, just try to minimize that. Other things that can have a big impact on your gut, if you've been around molds or fungus or infections, organ issues like surgery, when you've had an organ removed, whether it's tonsils or a gallbladder, that really can, impair your gut because you're having less of your natural defenses in your body. And then the last one, we can't say really enough about this. Stress is really, for many of us, like the tipping point. So my next example, coming off of the whole stress thing, I picked this picture of this glass of water, and you're probably going to think that I'm going to talk about the glass half full or half empty. I'm not. I'm going to talk about the impact of long-term stress. So the example is, if I asked you if you were holding that glass of water right now, how much does it weigh? And you might say 6 ounces, you might say 8. But in this example, the question I want to ask you is, how long have you been holding it? If you've been holding it for 30 seconds, might not be that bad. If you've been holding it for an hour, it might be kind of irritating. If you've been holding it for a year or a decade or a very long time, that weighs on you. And, many of us have these patterns of, there's a trigger in our life. It sets up a reaction, like an emotional reaction or a physical reaction. And then really, without us even knowing it, we, get into this loop of, well, this is how this always happens, and this is how it always goes. And our unconscious mind just tells that same story over and over again. So this is sort of a plea to you to look at those places in your life where you are carrying stress. I've addressed a couple of mine lately and really gotten some relief, but it was really my own thinking, and that, can frequently be a hold up to either you addressing your health or feeling better or getting to that next place in your life that you really want to be. Okay, so let's talk about how we heal the gut. And you can. That's the good news. And you don't have to do it with medications. Really the approach is very, very simple. Number one is a probiotic. And most of you, I think, have ordered one or are taking one. I hope you've gotten the impression now that those are really important. So if I didn't say it already, the reason your gut lining is so important and the balance of good and bad bacteria is that is your immunity. And when we live in a toxic world, or we've eaten processed foods, and I mean, who hasn't eaten the foods on that list? I mean, we all have. But what happens is you have not enough of the good bacteria, and you can have too much of the bad bacteria. So the probiotics help replace that balance of good and bad bacteria. The next piece is digestive enzymes. So if you're eating a whole food, a peach, a tomato, a cucumber, you don't really have a lot of difficulty breaking that food down, because if you remember my analogy of the plant cell to the human cell, the human cell is very structurally, evolved from the plant cell. So they have the same capacities. The plant cell carries chlorophyll. The human cell carries oxygen. So when you're trying to, digest, it's very, very easy for your body to assimilate the nutrients and break down something that's in a live plant. It's not really the case if you're eating, a heavy meal with meat and, gravy and sauces and all kinds of complex things. So a digestive enzyme can really help make sure that the food is more digestible. Other things that are really helpful, bone broth, which is, I gave you a recipe for it. It's basically just stock made with the bones of an animal, like chicken or beef. But because of that, you're getting into your body the enzymes, the minerals, and then the marrow has collagen in it, which is really, really good for healing that gut lining. So when we talked about in that picture, the tight junctures of the cells that line your gut, underneath that is, think about it as like a finely knit mat. But over time, that gut lining can be loosened and not as strong, and that's how those particles get through. So the collagen literally lays down those healing cells on top of that net and repairs them. Aloe is another thing. Coconut oil is amazing. And coconut oil is actually microbial or antimicrobial. So it's a great thing to eat to sort of boost your natural immunity. You can eat it, you can put coconut oil in your smoothies. You can cook with it. I have many of my clients just take a teaspoon of it at night mixed with a little bit of cinnamon. Coconut water, coconut milk, all really good for your body. Fermented veggies. The best example that I can give you that's easy is Bubby's brand sauerkraut or pickles. That naturally fermented process allows a lot of the lactobacilli, which are naturally probiotics, to get into your body. Other things that you can try, kefir or kombucha, greens of every sort. And then the orange and the yellow veggies are really, really good. So things like butternut squash, acorn squash, any of the deep oranges and yellows that are available actually right now in season. Okay, so let's talk about antigens. These are things that your body typically can have problems dealing with. 90% of all food reactions are from milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, shellfish, soy, and wheat. For some people, especially people with rheumatoid arthritis, the nightshades can be problematic. Those are mushrooms, potatoes, eggplants, and peppers. If you're really committed to healing your gut, the best thing to do is do an elimination diet. And that just takes all of those antigens and triggers out of your body for about 10 to 15 days so that you can calm all the inflammation, feel better, and then you can decide, how to add things back in. Some things you may want to add back in, like eggs. Other things like soy and wheat, you may not feel like those are ever going to be good for you. And then, eating organically and seasonally and plant-based with some sources of clean protein throughout your day, that's really the best way to reset. Okay, so let's talk about signs that your detoxification systems are impaired. These are signs that things aren't really working the way they need to be. And I have a lot of clients tell me this, they'll come, mostly for, weight, but then they'll say, I feel sluggish, I feel bloated, I feel tired. So we want to pay attention to all of those, because if you look at just that protocol that I showed you, just a simple approach can really eliminate a lot of those things. So problems to look out for: digestion and elimination problems. People who say, every time I eat, I feel upset, or I have a lot of burping or gas or indigestion, inability to lose or gain weight, allergies and congestion, skin disorders, fatigue, anger, depression, irritability. We really overlook that could be food related. And kind of the irony is that when we're feeling badly, we frequently want to soothe ourselves with, highly inflammatory foods like sugar, alcohol, caffeine, processed foods, and they make us feel worse. So it can be kind of a vicious cycle. Dark circles under your eyes, blood sugar imbalances, hormone imbalances, PMS, asthma, frequent infections, insomnia, and chemical sensitivities. For me, my sleep is definitely a place where I know if things aren't right, that's where I'm going to feel it. And again, it's a catch-22, because if I don't get enough sleep, then everything else sort of goes wrong. So usually we all have like one or two Achilles heels in here. Okay, so let's talk about the best nutrient-dense foods for your gut. Number one, animal fats. This whole business of a boneless, skinless chicken breast and broccoli, which is sort of like, I think what every female thinks their dinner should look like if they're on a diet. It's not really very good for us. So we want some animal fat in our diet. That can be a fatty fish. That can be, some animal fat in our meats. We need some cholesterol. Cholesterol is the precursor to all your hormones. So, clients who are vegan, they may feel good for a little while, but that's part of the reason why they don't feel very good long-term, is because they're just not getting the cholesterol that they need. Coconut products. Zinc deficiency can really play havoc with your digestion. So things that you can add are pumpkin seeds, ginger root, and pecans. Selenium-rich foods are things like oysters and Brazil nuts. Many people with thyroid will find if they just eat a couple of Brazil nuts a day, that actually makes them feel a little bit better. Foods that are rich in vitamin A, like liver, carrots, pumpkin, salmon, cod liver oil. I know no one likes to eat liver. If you're really not feeling well, it would be worth you looking at it like a liver supplement or a liver capsule. Vitamin A, things like carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkin. This is a perfect time to be eating those veggies. And you've heard me talk about soups. You can make a soup out of any one of those things, and it's very nourishing to your gut, helps you get the veggies in, and helps you repair, your system. And then alkalizing foods. Those are the greens, the veggies, and make sure we all get into this pattern of only eating, one or two. So it's really important to mix those up. Keep trying to rotate your colors and your varieties, and then fermented foods, which are the sauerkraut, the natural pickles. I mean, if you want to do kimchi, if you're someone who's adventurous and will start doing some fermenting, that's actually really amazing for your body. So, if you've heard me tell my story and where I think things got off course, I really feel like for me, it was the use of antibiotics when I was probably in my early 30s. So in my opinion, this is one of the biggest assaults to our immunity. So the way this occurs is that you have a balance in your gut of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. And I like to tell this because, when I say that the body is really like perfectly designed and it's always trying to get healthy, the way that we get our own immunity is as an infant, as we are being born and we're passing through the birth canal, we take in good and bad bacteria through our mouth and through our nose. So that is how that occurs. So if you're a C-section baby, you don't get quite as much. And then the next part is, you get it through breast milk. So if you're not breastfed, you're not getting as much. That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be sick and someone's going to say, well, I didn't have any of those and I turned out fine. I know that. I'm just saying that, we naturally have these defenses. When we take a broad spectrum antibiotic, your body can't distinguish between, or the drug doesn't distinguish between the good and bad bacteria. So it wipes them all out. I'm not saying that someone doesn't need an antibiotic. That's not my job. But what I see missing is that we don't do anything to replenish that. We just kind of let our bodies, hang out there. So I hope after this, you'll see that, if you're someone who does need to take an antibiotic, or your kid needs to because they have surgery or they get sick, that's fine. But you'll now know, like, okay, well, how do I arm myself? Because I didn't have any of that. So the good bacteria, they help with digestion. They extract your vitamins, and they basically keep peace in your intestinal tract. So like I said, while antibiotics are necessary, we should always follow those with a course of probiotics, nutrient-dense foods, and digestive enzymes to rebuild. So again, going back to why the greens are so important. So the probiotics are what, replace the gut bacteria. But prebiotics are these somewhat indigestible parts of our food that ferment at just the right rate so that we're constantly repopulating, re-inoculating our own digestive tract. So that's why the greens and the veggies are so important. And I find this really interesting. 80% of the antibiotics that are produced in the US are given to livestock. So, even if you're not taking antibiotics, if you're eating, factory produced chicken and meat and eggs, you're getting a lot of antibiotics. And, think about that with our kids. They're getting them all the time in their food and they're so little. So the things that we want to get out of our diet, these are the top 6. Number 1 are GMOs. So if you go back to my analogy of the cell, when you take a plant and you genetically modify it and you give it all these new chemical properties, the body doesn't know how to recognize it. So that's definitely something that is going to impair your gut. Antibiotics in food, processed sugar actually lowers your immunity. So I know, everybody has a sweet tooth and that's normal. We just want to try to satisfy that with, naturally sweet foods. Commercial and conventional dairy, there's really not much good in commercial or conventional dairy at all. If you need to do dairy, and most women feel like they don't want to drink milk and they can maybe give up the yogurt, but they like cheese. Well, you just need to choose very wisely and try to choose ones that are the least processed as possible and more sort of like the European style. Gluten definitely is going to impair your gut. And then food sensitivities. These are very individual. So the one thing I will tell someone is that suddenly they're flaring up from all kinds of stuff. I'm not really a huge fan of food testing. Like the skin testing, I think is really not very good at all. But the best thing to do is clean up your diet yourself, get all the triggers out, and then, one by one, put the things back in to see if you have reactions and just, see how you feel, because you're completely unique. But if you're having a ton, that's just a sign that you're inflamed and that you just need to do that detoxification and do a reset. Okay, one more thing. What I see frequently with all of my thyroid people and a lot of other clients is that they don't have the right balance of stomach acid. And there's a very, very strong correlation between low stomach acid and low thyroid. So we need stomach acid to break down protein. So we can be, if we don't have the right balance, we can be eating correctly, but we're not breaking the food down, and that can cause a lot of problems. And what's interesting is that if you take an antacid, you're lowering the acid in your stomach when you really need more. So the approach to that is to get off of all those medications and then to rebalance that stomach acid. And it's also kind of counterintuitive that foods that we perceive as being acidic, like a lemon, those are not acidic in the body. They're actually alkaline in the body. So low bacteria creates poor digestion and poor vitamin extraction. Signs of that are, gas, bloating, heartburn, heaviness. And the approach to that would be the probiotics, the digestive enzymes, doing lemon water, apple cider vinegar, that's the ACV, added to water, and then foods that are high in antioxidants. And if I haven't said this already, if you're someone who really is just not going to eat your greens, you can't get to them, you don't like them, then I hope you've seen the importance. And we need to look at like a greens supplement for you. I have different ones, for different people. We're not all the same. But, in the absence of those, you're really going to have trouble getting all of this working. So we need to take a look at that. Of course, I would like you to be eating them. What I tell people is that digestion begins in the brain, and we cannot just swallow things and think that it's all going to work. We need to be chewing our food and digesting our food and enjoying our food and sharing our food. And that's where, I come from as a nutrition person. I had a friend of mine, who was really struggling with her weight, and she went to a conventional dietitian, and, they gave her, packets of food that were 100 calories. And that's not, that's not what I want for you, for my clients. Okay, one more concept. So we talked about the balance of good and bad bacteria. That's gram positive and gram negative in your gut. So alkaline phosphatase is a substance that keeps the endotoxin, so that gram negative bacteria can emit toxins into the body. And the way that alkaline phosphatase works is it basically neutralizes that endotoxin. It captures it, just like a free radical in your body. That's what an antioxidant captures, that free radical. This is what's happening with that alkaline phosphatase. However, it can be damaged by gluten, low stomach acid, fasting, and fat-free diets and low protein diets. So I really wanted to bring that to the table so that you know that it's so important for you to manage that toxicity by what you're putting in. And then that next point, soda consumption lowers your alkaline phosphatase. So, I mean, if anybody out there is still drinking diet soda, I don't get it. I mean, I know I used to drink, goodness, I drank Tab, I drank Fresca, I drank Diet Coke. I mean, the irony is a Diet Coke never made any of us thinner. I don't know why we got into that, but it really is having a direct negative impact on your digestion. So you want to eliminate that or work on releasing that if that's something you're still, dealing with. And then, so the way that we get back to that is, so we can, the body will replenish that, but good fats, protein, and probiotics. Okay, so the next piece, I certainly, in my, exercise and diet career, kind of got this whole, fat is bad for you. And I counted grams of fat, and I knew how much fat was in everything. And that was sort of my, whatever mantra for a while. But we know that sometimes, and this is what happens in America, we are very trendy in our diets, and we don't take the time to do the research and to really learn. I like to say we're sort of myopic about it. So we'll just pick up a trend and we'll run with it. I make jokes about this stuff because this is my business. But, for a while, people were like, oh, I'm on the Mediterranean diet. I'm eating chocolate and I'm drinking wine, still missing out on sort of like the major concept of what that was. And I believe that, we were trying to shift out of, over fat consumption. But what's happened is we've started using these cheaper forms of fat that are not very good for our body. So there's two types of fats. The omega-3s reduce inflammation, and the omega-6s increase inflammation. It's okay for you to get some of both, and you can't avoid them entirely. It's just really good to get that balance in. And I would say if I look at somebody's diet, they're typically not getting enough of the omegas. The good news is it's really easy to put those into your diet and you'll love them. Most people really will have no problem, with finding at least 2 or 3 that they can start incorporating into their diet. So the omega-6s, those are the canola, the corn, the soy, the peanut, and the sunflower. If you're going to eat out, it's okay for you as a consumer to ask for what you want. There are restaurants that are really cooperative about helping, someone who's trying to attend to their diet. And, the question is, if you don't ask, the answer is no. Same thing with, foods in your grocery store. If you're not seeing something, ask the store manager. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but just say, could you bring in this product or could you bring in that? It may not happen right away, but the more people do that, the more awareness, because, right now what's in our store shelves is what people are buying. So, you can certainly ask for foods that you want. In a restaurant, just ask them, if you use these oils, please don't put it on my food. They can grill without it. It's not a problem. Here's the tricky thing about the omega-6s. They're in everything else, like salad dressing, condiments, cookies, crackers. They're cheap and they oxidize in the body. And I said this earlier, canola oil is actually processed with petroleum solvent. So you don't want that. The good news is I always try to give you the good stuff. Things that have omega-3s, flaxseed. Flax is really easy. You can put that, in a bowl of oatmeal. You can put it into a smoothie. It's really easy to incorporate that. Chia seeds, very easy to add. And the great thing about those, if you put them into a smoothie, they have the good fats. They actually expand. So they're going to give you like that fiber and that feeling of fullness. Don't overdo them, but those are great for you. All the fatty fish. I know not everybody likes sardines, but they're pretty good for you. I went through a period of time where I was trying to really attend to my diet. And if I was in an emergency, I would carry this can of sardines. I'd go out in the parking lot and eat them. But they did the trick. Nuts, olives, avocados. I didn't put coconut on there, but coconut also. Okay, and now we're going to get down to supplementation. I always feel like people want a supplement. They want to know what to take. And what I say about supplementation is it will never take the place of a poor diet or repair your gut. I don't consider probiotics and digestive enzymes. I consider those like tools to, that improve the management of your food. That's sort of a long way of saying it, but they're not a typical supplement. A supplement to me is when you say, well, I just need more vitamin A, or, for example, most multivitamins need to be put in the trash. They're not based on whole food, so they're just not very good for you. What happens with multivitamins is they'll look at, something like vitamin K, they'll study that in food, then they'll mimic the chemical structure of that. They'll make it in a lab, and most of them are made in China, and they don't work. So that's my hobby horse on multivitamins. Okay, so things that you need. Definitely a probiotic. Many people ask me, oh, I eat yogurt. That's not going to do the trick. I mean, if you want to add that to your diet, but as you've heard, buying a commercial processed yogurt is really, it's nothing better than a glorified candy bar, really. So you need to eat your probiotic on an empty stomach. You want to get that up and, up against your digestive lining, and you want to eat other probiotic rich foods, and then a digestive enzyme. I consider bone broth, collagen, and aloe. Those are supplementation. You may want to look into an amino acid, and I can recommend one. If you're not getting enough protein, or your body is not breaking down the food properly, you can actually just use an amino acid as a supplement. Supplements that I do recommend that are single source, that are difficult to get from food, are zinc, selenium, and magnesium. I don't have a source off the top of my head for the zinc and the selenium. The magnesium I do. There's something called Natural Calm, and it's an all-natural product. You can take it at night, and it helps repair the deficiency. It also can help with constipation, which a lot of people have, and it also will help with sleep. An omega or a fish oil, you can decide. There are vegan omegas or fish oils that you can take. I always want you to get it through food, but you can certainly look at a supplement. Then two that I feel like most people in my group would benefit from are vitamin D. Now let's just talk about vitamin D for one quick second. The best way to get your vitamin D, again, is natural. So sitting outside for 10 minutes a day is really good for you. There's other benefits for being out in nature, but my first prescription for vitamin D would be get outside for 10 to 15 minutes. But if you want to take a vitamin D, that's a supplement that's worth having it, because vitamin D is very critical in energy production. And if you've had a leaky gut, chances are your vitamin D levels are not where they want to be. And then vitamin B12. So if you happen to have something on your shelf that is fortified, or let's say you bought a protein powder or something and it has added vitamins, if you look at that and it says cyanocobalamin, basically you need to throw it away. Almost everybody who has a thyroid or adrenal problem has what's called a methylation issue, and it means that they are not able to convert the inactive form, which is cyanocobalamin, to the active form, which is methylcobalamin. So that means that that's just not working for you. And really too much of it is actually toxic. So the reason why that is the case is that it's cheap. So back to my first thing about cheap and easy, it doesn't work. And it's very frustrating to me as a health coach and as a nutrition, expert, to see the kinds of things that are being sold that are fake or counterfeit, because, we're all trying to do the best we can. And it's frustrating to see that your hard work or your research is leading you down a path. So at least you have my promise to you that, I don't do a lot of products. I do them to support my clients and to correct deficiencies. But, I definitely want you taking the best of the best. Are they more expensive? Not always, but, if there's a reason for it, and if it's quality, I'm going to put that out for you. It's up to you to make that choice, but I want you to have, the best of the best, at least amongst your choices. So that is actually the end of our presentation. I know we covered a lot. Just so you know, I know everyone always asks me, okay, well, just show me how this all lays out. I'm going to give you, in our follow-up, kind of an overview of a typical day, how that would lay out in terms of protein and fats and greens, just to kind of give you a sense of how to put that together. I try not to overwhelm people because, if I give you 1,000 recipes or whatnot, people just don't know how to incorporate all of that. And I don't like to see somebody with a refrigerator full of rotted food that they don't know what to do with. So I kind of like to baby step you through that. But I will give you kind of an overview of what I consider to be kind of an ideal day. And I love the fact that you guys are asking the practical questions of, making batches or, what do I do if I did overeat? Those are all great ways for you to assimilate everything that we're talking about. Okay, so I do want to ask you, did you make a connection to where you got off balance? Because if it was a stress or if it was an illness or it was a medication or it was something that was traumatic to you, let us help you address that, because that's part of you getting well. And it's not about blame or shame or, shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's just helpful to know where things, got off track so that we're really comprehensively addressing that. Okay, and I'm believing now at this point you have the tools to start working on healing your gut. So that's the probiotic, the digestive enzymes, the bone broth, the fermented foods, and starting to eliminate triggers. I'd love to hear if you're doing that, if you're feeling any better. I have a client, she really is not able to kind of start working on her food just yet, but just the simple things with the probiotic and doing a little bit of juicing, she was eliminating so much better. And that's a great sign. We're not going to lose weight until we're starting to lose the toxicity. Okay, so blood sugar balance is huge for thyroid and adrenals. You remember we talked about cortisol. When your cortisol is going up, your cortisol breaks down your body. Your DHEA is what rebuilds your body. So when those two are not working together, you're not going to be rebuilding, and you're going to be putting down that belly fat. And the belly fat is where you have cortisol, and the cortisol in the belly is talking to your cortisol. So blood sugar balance is going to be huge for all of us. So we want to be eating some good protein, some good fats every few hours. And that's why snacks matter, because, we need to kind of keep our blood sugar level. Also, when you do that, you avoid that whole binge eating, which is really not about you being a weak person. It's about you not having the blood sugar. And finally, your body is just like, let me rip, the door off the refrigerator and eat this bag of chips while I'm making dinner. Been there, done that. Okay, so that's what I want you to be really sort of looking at, is every couple of hours. And that means planning some snacks, but it doesn't have to be that hard. If you made the power balls, you can take those. If you have to have a bar, it's okay, but choose one that is higher protein, not processed, doesn't have gluten or doesn't have soy in it. You can also do part of an avocado, some nuts, some almond butter. Leftovers are very, very easy. I know it's not glamorous, but if you have some chicken left over from last night, put it in a container and eat it at your desk, or grab, 2 pieces and have those midday. It's an easy thing to do, and it doesn't require any cooking. Okay, and then we need to be starting to get your greens into your diet in every single way possible. So juices, smoothies, soups, roasted vegetables, veggie noodles, salads. There's got to be a way that you're doing that. And if you're not, let me know, because we need to talk about how to do that. And then lastly, I really want you to focus on sleep, because sleep is the reset button for everything. Sleep is where we restore our memory and learning. Sleep is where our hormones repair. Sleep is where, our brain repairs. So if you're not getting quality sleep, that's not a good thing. So I want you to try to look at your sleep, see if it's optimal. We can talk about that next session if it's not, because I have a whole protocol for what I call sleep hygiene. And I really believe that a lot of our hormone issues and our cortisol has to do with, our sleep being not good, or our brain not being in a place where we're allowing ourselves to rest. So I think that is everything for tonight or this morning. I'm going to sign off in just a second. You'll see me edit out of my PowerPoint. But I thank you guys all for being here. Make sure you post your questions on Facebook. Make sure you come to the Q&A on Friday. Thank you so much for your patience with all the technology stuff and for, just being patient. Have a great day. Thanks so much for being here.